IAP Porject How to Do a Two-Hand Backhand by Anthony Leung and Robert Carrasco. Our goal for each participant will be able to demonstrate proper technique of a two-hand backhand as well as consistently hitting the ball 5 times with correct critical features. So here is our expert model from the vantage point of perpendicular to frontal plane. Critical features before contact are 180 degrees wrist and elbow extension, 50 degrees knee flexion, and after contact 30 degrees wrist flexion, 70 degrees elbow flexion, and 50 degrees knee flexion. Here is an alternate view of our expert model from the vantage point of perpendicular to sagittal plane. Here is participant 1's initial attempt of a backhand. Proper use of elbow wrist extension is seen before contact, yet there is no wrist flexion after contact. Also, foot pivot is non-existent. Here is participant 2's initial attempt of a backhand. Proper use of wrist elbow extension is seen as well as wrist elbow flexion after contact. Knee flexion is sufficient. Foot pivot is shown yet delayed once contact is made. Here is participant 3's initial attempt of a backhand. Execution of all critical features is seen. As we will see later on, participant 3 will be tasked to do a one-hand backhand as a challenge incentive. In session 2, participant 1 is equipped with a racket in order to practice their swing. Wrist flexion is not shown after contact, yet we do see improvement with foot pivots. Foot pivot is executed once contact has been made. The intervention we used was a visual model. By replaying the video of the participant, they were able to see the need for wrist flexion, and using the cue of throwing a bag behind the back helped reinforce that. In session 2, participant 2 is equipped with a racket in order to practice their swing. Wrist flexion is still not shown, as well as foot pivot is still delayed. The intervention we used was a visual model. By replaying the video of the participant, they were able to see how delayed their foot pivot was. In session 2, participant 3 met all critical features. Body position 45 degrees before contact, initial wrist elbow extension and wrist elbow flexion, knee flexion is apparent, foot pivot is timed well once contact has been made. In session 3, a drop feed drill has been implemented. Wrist elbow flexion occurs, yet participant 1's knee flexion and pivot foot is gone. The intervention of exaggeration is used in order to have the participant mimic and memorize the steps needed to do a backhand. After intervention, significant results occurred. We see proper use of knee flexion as well as an exaggerated foot pivot. In session 3, participant 2 still struggles with moving his pivot foot as soon as he makes contact with the ball. Participant is also flexing the elbow too soon before the contact when he should be keeping the elbow in extension. The intervention of exaggeration was used in order to fix the mistakes. Although we still see a delay in the pivot foot, the correction of elbow extension before contact was corrected. As stated earlier, participant 3 excelled in all critical features of a two-hand backhand. The challenge of a one-hand backhand was given, yet a major issue we see is that the pivot foot does not come forward after contact has been made, as well as body position isn't at a 45-degree angle. The intervention of exaggeration was used in order to fix the mistakes. A strong emphasis on foot pivot was shown to the participant. After intervention, we see slight movement of the foot pivot, yet still struggled to keep that pivot foot forward. In session 4, we get a different vantage point in order to see the changes that were made while incorporating other critical features such as repositioning and hitting cross-court to a partner. Although there was an improvement of foot pivot, there wasn't enough flexion of the wrist. We noticed this as there wasn't enough wrist flexion due to the ball going too high rather than straight flat. The intervention of manual guidance was used with participant 1 to demonstrate the emphasis of wrist flexion as well as pivoting the foot. In session 4, participant 2 demonstrates proper flexion of the elbow and wrist. As we can see, the ball goes straighter, yet his main issue of delaying the pivot foot is still eminent. The use of manual guidance with participant 2 was to enforce the situation with his pivot foot. With participant 3, proper critical features have been met and proper execution of wrist flexion was demonstrated as the ball is super low to the ground. Only problem is that the pivot foot isn't moving as soon as the racket comes in contact with the ball. The intervention of using a visual model was shown to participant 3 to help with pivoting the foot. So in conclusion, with participant 1, some shots were able to hit all critical features, while he still showed some inconsistencies with pivoting the foot forward. We can also see he struggled with wrist flexion as the ball either went too high or too low, which can only be fixed with more practice. Although there were some inconsistencies, I'm very happy as he was able to fix the knee flexion as well as consistently hit 5 balls in a row. We must remember that participant 1 has had some tennis background of about 6 months of gameplay, yet never had formal backhand training till now. So habits definitely played a factor in why he struggled to keep the pivot foot forward, as well as an inconsistent wrist flexion. Although his overall performance definitely surpassed many beginners that I have taught, in due time, participant 1 will have a proper two-hand backhand with more practice. As for participant 2, we can say the same thing with participant 1. Only difference was that participant 2 has been playing tennis since high school and throughout the years hasn't played consistent tennis for about 4+ years. Since session 1, the individual has always struggled with moving that pivot foot forward, yet that was his only main issue. Participant 2 overall gameplay was proficient and excelled with wrist elbow extension before contact and wrist elbow flexion after the contact. As mentioned earlier, old habits die hard, and to fix something that isn't broken so late in his years, it was pretty much pointless. Can't teach an old dog new tricks, yet we did improve his overall shot selection. Lastly, with participant 3, from sessions 1 and 2, his overall feel for the game of tennis was strong. He excelled at a high level and accomplished all the set critical features that I had established. It is quite impressive how quick participant 3 was able to pick up the one-hand backhand in such a short amount of time. We saw when the visual intervention was introduced in session 4 and corrections were made when session 5 was recorded. Although there was a slight delay in pivoting the foot, overall mechanics of wrist elbow extension prior to contact, and once he made contact, we saw wrist and elbow flexion. Granted, it's obvious that participant 3 has more tennis experience compared to the other participants, yet by practicing and potentially using him as a model, this will only improve participant 1 and 2's gameplay.